What's up everyone, my name is Daniel, and here are your Week 12 waiver wire picks. For most of you guys, we only have 2 weeks left in the regular season, so let's make this count. Let's start with our quarterbacks, and the first guy on our list is Derek Carr. He finally bounced back after underperforming in his last 3 games. Even though the Raiders are somewhat run heavy, he has 2 favorable matchups against the Falcons and Jets in the next 2 weeks. For those of you that are QB needy, he's a good streamer as a QB2 for the next 2 weeks. Next up is Phillip Rivers. Is he a second half quarterback? He might be. Rivers has scored 20 plus points in his last 3 of 4 games and has an easy schedule up until week 16 when he plays the Pittsburgh Steelers. Even though the Colts are supposed to be a run first team, since week 5, Rivers has thrown at least 33 times in each one of his matchups. Rivers provides a good streaming option as a QB2 with upside. Next up is Kirk Cousins. He had a huge game against the Dallas Cowboys this week. Cousins threw for 314 yards and 3 touchdowns as he broke the 20-point mark for the 3rd time in the last 5 games. The Vikings defense is bad enough that they'll likely be in close games or playing from behind for the rest of the season. This gives Cousins a lot of opportunities to throw the ball. As we saw this week, the Cowboys were able to put up 31 points against them. Lastly is Daniel Jones. He's coming off of his bye and has 2 favorable matchups coming up against the Bengals and the Seahawks. While his passing numbers aren't too impressive, he does provide a little bit of value in the rushing game. He's broken 20 points in 2 out of his last 4 games, so he does provide value as a QB2. For some deeper stashes, look to Teddy Bridgewater, Ryan Fitzpatrick, and Jalen Hurts. Next, we're going to talk about running backs, and we're starting off with Gus Edwards. Both J.K. Dobbins and Mark Ingram are put on the COVID list, so he should be the lead guy this week against the Steelers and potentially next week as well, since the Ravens have back-to-back Thursday night football games. Having a lead back on a potent offense this late in the season is rare. He should be a priority pickup even though he's facing a tough Steelers defense this week. Next, let's talk about Frank Gore. It's 2020 and we're somehow still talking about picking up Frank Gore off the waiver wire. Perine is banged up and his status for week 12 is up in the air. If he's unable to play, Frank Gore should take the lead role for the Jets. Although he wasn't super fantasy relevant earlier this year, he has been consistently getting 10 plus touches for most of his games, and that alone makes him flex worthy in some leagues. Next is James White. With Rex Burkhead likely out for a long time due to an ACL injury, the doors open wide for the previous Super Bowl MVP. Cam Newton has been passing to his running backs a lot in the recent weeks, and I expect James White to fill that role. He's definitely an interesting pickup and stash, but I really don't feel confident starting Patriots running backs. Similarly to James White, Sony Michel is also an interesting pickup. He wasn't able to play in week 11, but he was activated and should be able to go for week 12. Now I'm not saying go and pick up both James White and Sony, but think about who you like better and choose one. People speculate that he could be backing up Damien Harris, but he also has a potential to be that starting running back for the Patriots. Worth a stash, and he could be good on your bench. Lastly is Wayne Gallman, who surprisingly only owned in a third of ESPN leagues. His carries have steadily gone up, and he scored 5 touchdowns in the last 4 games. While his yards aren't great, his tendency to find the end zone makes him an RB2 with upside for the rest of the season until Devontae Freeman gets back. For deeper stashes, we're looking at Tony Pollard, Samaje Perine, Benny Snell, Adrian Peterson, and Carl's Hyde. Just like every week, wide receivers are aplenty. I have 6 for you to look at. First is Michael Pittman Jr. After his breakout game last week, he solidified himself as a wide receiver 1 for the Colts this week by leading the team in yards as well as finding the end zone for the first time. While his targets were a lot lower, he seems to be one of Rivers' favorite targets and is creeping into the wide receiver 2 territory for the rest of the season. Next is Damiere Byrd. He had 7 targets this week and has seen a team high targets in a few other games earlier this season. I'm not super convinced on him just yet, but look to him to be a stash in case Cam starts to favor him a lot more. It's interesting to also note that he's the first wide receiver to catch a touchdown from Cam Newton this season. We definitely don't want to overreact, but the target and volume alone makes him someone that we can't just ignore. The next guy on our list is Denzel Mims. The Jets are bad, but he's been heavily involved in their passing attack, as he's dominated both their target share and snap count. While he hasn't really had his breakout game just yet, he could be worthy for a flex play for teams that are really in need of a wide receiver. The next guy just came off of a bye, and he's somehow still owned in less than 50% of ESPN leagues, and that's Cole Beasley. We have to be somewhat cautious with him. His performance, in my opinion, is directly tied to whether or not John Brown plays. Keep an eye out for John Brown's injury, but if he's not able to go, Cole Beasley is a really good flex with wide receiver 2 upside for the next few weeks. Nelson Agholor has showed up on my list before, and he's worth looking at again. Even though he recently had 2 duds, he has scored in his last 5 of 7 games. He looks to be the Raiders' top deep threat and is the next in line for targets after Darren Waller. He's got 2 really good matchups coming up, so he's definitely worth a play. Lastly, we're going to talk about Tim Patrick. While he tied Jerry Jeudy for the most targets this week, he was the most productive wide receiver on the Broncos by getting 5 catches for 119 yards. He consistently gets that high volume targets and has scored double digits in his last 5 of 7 games. I think he might be the wide receiver to own here, so look to him to continue to get fed by Drew Lock. Some deeper stashes are Jalen Reagor, Keke Coutee, Russell Gage, Allen Lazard, Breshad Perriman, and Dez Bryant. The tight ends are tough, especially on the free agency list, but I've got 4 for you. The first guy is Jordan Atkins. He's been relatively quiet after he came back from injury, but he had his best game this week by getting 5 catches for 83 yards on 6 targets. He ran a total of 26 routes, which was way more than both Pharaoh Brown and Darren Fells combined at 22. He could definitely be a good play at tight end, especially if Randall Cobb's injury keeps him out for weeks. Next is Dalton Schultz. Against the Vikings this week, we saw him get forced the ball 3 times in the end zone during their game-winning drive. He's gotten a good amount of targets over the last few weeks and tied the team in second highest targets with 6 this week. Look to him to continue to be a go-to for Andy Dalton and a red zone target. Jordan Reed is coming off of a bye, but he finally had the performance that we wanted him to have by going for 5 receptions and 62 yards in week 10. Kittle is going to be out for what is most likely the rest of the season, so I believe that he's going to be one of Nick Mullen's top targets moving forward. That is, if Reed can stay healthy, and that's a big if. Lastly, we have Jimmy Graham. He posted a dud in week 10, but otherwise has been a pretty average tight end with some upside. He gets a decent amount of targets from Nick Foles and is second among all tight ends in red zone targets. At the end of the day, we have to look at the floor, the low floor for all the tight ends left in the free agency and recognize that Jimmy Graham probably has one of the higher upsides. For some other considerations, we have Trey Burton, Logan Thomas, Irv Smith, and Robert Tonyan. I have 4 defenses for you to stream this week. First are the Green Bay Packers. Green Bay is playing an abysmal Bears defense this week, who are second to last in both yards and points per game. Beware though, because my take is divisional games get wonky, and whatever we think might be on paper, a lot of times doesn't happen. Still, I do like the Packers defense as a stream this week. Next up are the New York Giants. Joe Burrow finally got the Andrew Luck treatment, and he's out for the rest of the season. Ryan Finley is now the starting quarterback, and he had 4 sacks and an interception in the small amount of time that he played against Washington. I would expect the Giants to be able to create some turnover and a lot of pressure this week. Next, we have the Washington football team. If you had them last week, you can keep them to stream again. They're playing a Dallas offense in which they had 17 points against them a few weeks ago. We should expect them to feast on the Cowboys before they go home and feast on their Thanksgiving dinner. Lastly, the Cleveland Browns should be a great play this week again. They're facing a Jacksonville team where their quarterback threw for 4 interceptions last week. They've been bringing a lot of pressure and has held their opponents to less than 17 points in each of the last 3 games. Here is a full list of every player that we talked about today. This has been your Week 12 waiver wire pickup list. I will be posting the live stream times tonight, but we'll be doing our 2-part split, one early and one late night to accommodate all of our friends around the world. Remember to like this video, comment any questions that you have, as well as sub to my channel for notifications on all new content as well as live streams. You can also follow me on Instagram at DZFantasyFootball for interactive content as well as notifications of when I go live. I hope this helps some of you, and hopefully we can all make that last minute push into the playoffs. That's it for this week. Thank you all, and until next time.